Everything you want, you can have instantaneously. Everything you want, instant gratification. Except job satisfaction and strength of relationships, there ain't no app for that. They are slow, meandering, uncomfortable, messy processes. You have an entire generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations. The other problem, to compound it, is we're growing up in a Facebook, Instagram world. In other words, we're good at putting filters on things. We're good at showing people that life is amazing even though I'm depressed. And so everybody sounds tough. And everybody sounds like they got it all figured out. And the reality is there's very little toughness and most people don't have it figured out.
They are good at curating. I'm really good at showing you the life I want you to think that I lead. And so they're really good at presenting a confidence that they don't have. They sound like they have all the answers when they don't. There is good evidence that this young generation seems less capable to deal with stress than previous generations. That is true. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow made a huge mistake in that hierarchy. His baseline, or basic need, is food and shelter. I've never heard of anyone dying by suicide because they were hungry. I've heard of people dying by suicide because they were lonely.
So you have an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations, through no fault of their own. They were dealt a bad hand. Now let's add in technology. And you have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive. You have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. The worst case scenario is we're seeing an increase in suicide rates, we're seeing an increase in accidental deaths due to drug overdoses, we're seeing more and more kids drop out of school or take leaves of absence due to depression. This is really bad. Those are all bad cases, right? The best case scenario is you'll have an entire population growing up and going through life and just never really finding joy. They'll never really find deep fulfillment in work or in life. They'll just waft through life and it'll be just fine. How's your job? Fine. How's your relationship? It's fine. Like that's the best case scenario.
Our lives looked very different than they do now. We got our sense of purpose from church, hung out with our neighbors, they came over and on the weekends, and work was a place that we went to make money to pay for our lives, pay our bills. It was also a different time where we were super loyal to the company and the company was super loyal to us. And that was life. And then church attendance started to decline. We don't have our neighbors over on a weekend basis. So all of those things we started to look to work to replace. So now we say to work, you have to give me a sense of purpose. You have to give me my social life. You have to give me a sense of community and belonging. And it is an impossible standard to put on any culture that they can do all those things for you, just like we've put impossible standards on romantic partners that they have to be my intellectual equal, they have to be sexually compatible with me, they have to be emotionally compatible with me, they have to share all of my interests, all of my politics. These are impossible standards to put on another human being, and we're literally setting people up to fail. We're setting up business cultures up to fail as well. Like literally no culture can live up to that standard. You know, this younger generation who seem to lack the skills for coping with stress, not very good at asking for help, very confrontation avoidant, like I said, so afraid sometimes to have the question, ask the boss, can I have a raise, that they would rather just quit. And it's often with an email that says, you don't appreciate me, you don't pay me enough. I was like, what? You just had to ask me, I would have given you a raise, you know? And I think part of it is also that, you know, when somebody is anxious about something, they do poorly present. They do make things binary because there's fear or anxiety or stress or fear of rejection. What if my boss says no? Right? Can I handle that? Like all of these things that come into these very sort of binary aggressive things. And I always equate all of these challenges at work to personal relationships. Like you can't go to the person you love in your relationship and say, I demand this. It's just not going to go well, right? But you present a situation, you say, I want us to move through this, and how do we work through this together? And I think that's how these difficult work conversations need to happen. A work relationship is a relationship like any other relationship. And so you flash forward to adulthood, and men who learned that skill of taking a risk, facing rejection, being rejected, and then trying again, makes them resilient entrepreneurs. Assuming traditional roles are played, a woman who hasn't learned the skill of risk rejection is more afraid of the risk as an adult. We could argue that with online dating, swiping left and right, that everybody's losing the skill. That nobody has to take a risk because you just swipe right. You don't know that they swiped left on you. They think maybe they just didn't see you. So you only get it connected, but nobody ever gets rejected. So are we building, that goes back to the original conversation of a young generation that's less capable of dealing with stress than older generations. Like there are fewer opportunities to risk, reject, have to try again.
Everything you want, you can have instantaneously. Everything you want, instant gratification, except job satisfaction and strength of relationships. There ain't no app for that. They are slow, meandering, uncomfortable, messy processes. And so I keep meeting these wonderful, fantastic, idealistic, hardworking, smart kids. They've just graduated school. They're in their entry-level job. I sit down with them and I go, how's it going? They go, I think I'm gonna quit. I'm like, why? They're like, I'm not making an impact. I'm like, you've been here 8 months. It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain and they have this abstract concept called impact that they want to have in the world, which is the summit. What they don't see is the mountain. I don't care if you go up the mountain quickly or slowly, but there's still a mountain. And so what this young generation needs to learn is patience. That some things that really, really matter, like love, or job fulfillment, joy, love of life, self-confidence, a skill set, any of these things, all of these things take time. Sometimes you can expedite pieces of it, but the overall journey is arduous and long and difficult. And if you don't ask for help and learn that skill set, you will fall off the mountain. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks, right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them if something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook. These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad, too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun, too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance. But if you don't have the phone, you just kind of enjoy the world. And that's where ideas happen. The constant engagement is not where you have innovation and ideas. Ideas happen when our minds wander and we go, and you see something, I bet they could do that. That's called innovation, right? But we're taking away all those little moments. And none of us should charge our phones by our beds. We should be charging our phones in the living rooms. Remove the temptation. You wake up in the middle of the night because you can't sleep, you won't check your phone, which makes it worse. But if it's in the living room, it's relaxed, it's fine. But it's my alarm clock. Buy an alarm clock. They cost $8, right? I'll buy you an alarm clock, right? But the point is we now in industry, whether we like it or not, we don't get a choice. We now have a responsibility to make up the shortfall and to help this amazing, idealistic, fantastic generation build their confidence, learn patience, learn the social skills, find a better balance between life and technology. Because quite frankly, it's the right thing to do.
And you hear me, you hear me say this over again. It's a sort of it's a repeating pattern, which is for those who want to show up better in the lives of others, which is I see being healthy as a service to others. I see being a better listener being a service. I see everything in terms of service to others. There are benefits to you as well, of course. But I think we've neglected for decades the socialness of our animal, and social media and cell phones and the ubiquity of those technologies have complicated our ability to be human. And so the reason to learn to be vulnerable is not for ourselves, it's for a service to others. And I talk about this all the time, which we've confused these things. And once again, going back to what we were talking about before, we've weirdly taken these very pro-social activities and made them selfish. We've confused things here, which is we don't get to decide when we're present. We get to practice being present. But you actually are not present until someone else says you are. And so for anyone who's ever practiced meditation, there are absolutely benefits to us, without a doubt. And those are important mental and physical health benefits of meditation and mindfulness, and we should practice those for sure. But there's also what I think is the primary reason, some would consider secondary reason, which is if you practice meditation, for example, you learn to focus on one thing, your mantra, a sound, whatever it is. You learn your breath, you don't think of nothing, you think of one thing. You focus on one thing, right? And if something interrupts that thing, you have a thought. Did I leave the washing machine on? You label it a thought and you push it out of your head and you say, I'll deal with it later. And that's the whole idea, is total focus and the ability to put your thoughts out of your head to stay focused on this one thing. Now think about when you're sitting listening with a friend who's going through a hard time. Are you listening or are you waiting for your turn to speak? Right? The whole meditation practice that you've been doing is now valuable in this moment, where you are focused entirely on what they're saying to you. Every distraction, every screech of a car tire outside, everybody who's talking around you, you don't hear any of it. You only hear what they're saying to you. You're entirely focused on what they're saying to you. And when you have your own thoughts of advice you'd like to give, or things you want to tell them, oh my God, me too, that happened to me as well, right? You say, nope, that's not important in this moment, and you put it out of your head and deal with it later. And at the end of that conversation, your friend will say, thank you, I feel heard. Or thank you for being there for me, or thank you for holding space for me, or thank you for listening. And those are all indications that congratulations, you've been present for another. And I think what gives our lives purpose is not to wake up every morning to learn meditation so that we can be present for ourselves, though that is valuable. What gives our lives purpose is to do these things for another. There's nothing wrong with doing things and enjoying the benefit of those things yourself, by all means. But the deep feeling sense of purpose and meaning to one's life or to one's work only comes when those things are for another. And in my view, primarily for another, where our benefit is secondary. You can't have equal. There's no such thing as equal, because at one point, one of those things will have to be sacrificed for the other. And do you sacrifice your spouse's love so that you can stay in love? Or do you sacrifice your comfort? Do you sacrifice your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse's comfort so that you can be better, or do you sacrifice your comfort so they can feel better? It's obvious. Well, it's the same here. It's the same analogy, which is I choose to sacrifice my happiness, my joy, my comfort, my Lamborghini in this moment, not forever, but in this moment, for you, my employee, for you, my friend. I will delay so that you can have. And that's where the joy and love of business, relationships, friendships come from. There's a great irony in all of this, which is to sacrifice for another really is the most beautiful thing we can ever do. I mean, that's kind of what love is. It's sacrificing for another. And all of these things, whether it's learning to be a better communicator, learning mindfulness and meditation, being in shape, if you can translate those things in for another, all of those things start to have a higher purpose.